Hey there, this is Alexis Knight, and welcome to True Crime, the Court of Public Opinion. I'm your host, guiding you through cases that have moved through the courts and have reached a conclusion. But these cases have left the public completely divided. These are not your typical cut and dried cases. These are the ones where the facts may be clear, but the truth, well, that's a different story. Because of their nature, these cases are difficult to decide, and they leave people, the public, at odds with each other. The court has made its ruling, but then what do you think? Here we're going to dive into a case that has sparked endless debate. So listen closely, and by the end of the episode, you will have the chance to decide for yourself. Was justice truly served, or is there more to the story? This is a case that left people horrified, confused, and questioning the limits of forgiveness and influence. Our story begins in the 50s in New York City, where a young woman named Linda Riss fell in love with Burt Pugach, a charismatic yet troubled attorney who had a taste for luxury. Their romance seemed destined for the fairy tale ending, until Linda learned a devastating truth about Burt's life that shattered her dreams and led her to cut ties with him. But Burt wasn't a man to take no for an answer. Enraged by Linda's decision to move on, he resorted to unimaginable violence. In a shocking act of control, he arranged for men to throw lye in Linda's face, leaving her disfigured and partially blind. This is atrocious, yet the story doesn't end there. In a twist few saw coming, Linda would later make the decision that's left people talking about this case for decades. Years after Burt served his prison sentence, she married him. Buckle up, guys. Here we go. Why would someone return to the person who caused them unimaginable pain? Was Linda under Burt's influence? Or was there something more complex going on? We always wonder why people do what they do, and this case forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about power and control and the perplexing psychology of human relationships. So, was Burt's punishment enough for his crime, or is there more to this twisted tale? We have the facts, the arguments, and the public's reaction to one of the most unsettling cases of love and revenge you're ever going to hear. Let's get into it. In the early 50s in New York City, it was a place of opportunity, glamour, social ambition, especially for those seeking to climb the social ladder. Linda Riss, a young woman from the Bronx, was full of youthful charm, and her beauty quickly captured the attention of Burt Pugach, a man nearly 20 years her senior. Burt was no ordinary suitor, though. He was a successful attorney with an impressive lifestyle, boasting luxury cars, a lavish home, and the charisma that Linda found too hard to resist. For a young woman from modest means, Burt seemed to be offering her a life she'd only dreamed of. But as with many tales that seemed too good to be true, Linda's dreams were soon dashed by a shocking revelation. Burt wasn't exactly the eligible bachelor he appeared to be. Behind his affluence and charm was a disturbing reality. He was already married. When Linda discovered the truth, she felt deceived, humiliated, and ultimately decided to end the relationship. But Burt was not really the type to let go so easily. Consumed by Linda's rejection, his admiration took a dark and dangerous turn. So Burt began obsessively pursuing her, refusing to accept the idea that she could walk away from him. The lengths he would go to in order to control Linda would soon horrify not only her, but an entire city. With Linda trying to move on and Burt refusing to release his grip, the stage was set for one of the most disturbing crimes of passion New York had ever seen. This was no ordinary breakup. Burt's obsession wasn't a fleeting feeling. Oh no, this was the beginning of a descent into a shocking act of violence that would change Linda's life forever. And what happened next raises a central question. Where does infatuation end and manipulation begin? When does love turn into something far darker? As you listen, as we go forward here, take note of Linda and Burt's story and ask yourself, can someone truly be so influenced? Or are there deeper forces at work? Linda's attempt to move on from Burt was anything but simple. In the months following their breakup, Burt's pursuit grew relentless. He made constant calls, he sent letters, he even resorted to showing up at her home and her workplace, refusing to accept that their relationship was over. Friends of Linda began to worry for her safety, urging her to take precautions as Burt's obsession intensified. But to everyone's dismay, his attempts to win her back soon turned from disturbing to outright dangerous. When Linda began dating another man, Burt's behavior escalated. Witnesses described Burt as losing control, expressing that if he could not have her, no one else could have her either. And, we've all heard that before. And when does that end? Nice. This guy's obsession had turned into something else entirely. It was a need to dominate, to control Linda's fate, whether through affection or terror. He wanted to get it done. Then, in a terrifying escalation, Burt decided on a course of action that would leave Linda physically and emotionally scarred for the rest of her life. He hired men to attack her, and he instructed them to throw lye, which is a caustic chemical, into her face. This is outrageous, okay? This attack left Linda permanently disfigured, blinding her in one eye and leaving her with deep emotional wounds, of course. The cruelty of the act was horrifying, and it was hard for the public to fathom how someone could commit such an atrocity. Burt was quickly apprehended and ultimately sentenced to prison for this unimaginable crime. But while the court had made its ruling, the story was far from over. As with cases like this, the public was left questioning how anyone could have such power over another person's life and decisions. How is this possible? As the case unfolded, people really did. They struggled to understand how Linda could survive such a harrowing ordeal and yet, years later, make the incomprehensible decision to marry the man who had destroyed her life. What could compel a woman to return to a man capable of such violence? Was she influenced, manipulated, or simply following her own twisted sense of love and loyalty? The answer, even today, okay, the answer even today, with everything we think we know, it still remains elusive and troubling. So with these questions in mind, let's look deeper into the disturbing dynamic between Burt and Linda, exploring the boundary between love and control and asking, can someone be held responsible for the influence they wield over another person's choices? Think about that one. Can someone be held responsible for the influence they wield over another's choices? Not as easy to answer as you think. Okay, now after Burt's sentencing, Linda struggled to rebuild her life, bearing the physical and emotional scars of the attack. For many, the story might have ended there. Justice was served, a survivor moving forward. But Burt's influence didn't fade with his imprisonment. He continued to reach out to Linda from behind bars. He would send her letters, professing his undying love and insisting that he'd changed. The persistence of his affection, even after committing such an atrocity, created a perplexing narrative. How is it that someone could cause so much pain and yet still speak of love? And perhaps more disturbingly, why would Linda be listening? Right? I think that's the main question that people want to know. Years passed, and while many assumed Bert's attempts to win Linda back would remain fruitless, Linda ends up surprising the world by beginning to correspond with him. Gradually, her resolve appeared to soften. Some speculated she felt isolated and misunderstood after her disfigurement, making Bert's attention seem, like it's a source of comfort. Others believed, well, she's just trapped in a cycle of trauma and dependence. Whatever her reasons, Linda's eventual decision to marry Burt after his release was a twist that no one expected. Their reunion raised haunting questions. Had Linda forgiven him? Had Bert's obsession truly turned into remorse? Or had he managed somehow to retain control over her from the shadows of his prison cell? Public opinion was split. Some saw Linda as a victim, forever ensnared by Bert's manipulation, while others thought she'd made a conscious, albeit bewildering, choice to reunite with him. This case, with all its twisted turns, left everyone questioning the nature of love, influence, and forgiveness. I mean, can true remorse erase the scars of a horrific act? And if someone willingly returns to an abuser, where does the line of accountability fall? As we unravel the final elements of this case, consider what justice truly means here and ask yourself, in love and obsession, okay, who really holds the power? To understand the shocking outcome of this case, let's step back to when Linda Riss and Burt, they first crossed paths. Linda's a young woman of modest means. She's living in the Bronx. And Burt, with his charming personality and extravagant lifestyle, he was an attractive suitor. I mean, their relationship quickly became serious, with Burt showering Linda with gifts and promises of a glamorous future. But beneath this charming exterior, Burt harbored dark secrets and a controlling personality. Initially, Linda believed she'd found her ideal partner, someone who would give her stability and a life of luxury. Burt made sure she saw the best parts of him. You know, the representative we always show someone when we first meet them. He was offering glimpses of his high status lifestyle and painting a picture of a life that they could share. However, as their relationship progressed, Linda began noticing inconsistencies. Burt was often evasive, avoiding conversations about his personal life and keeping her away from certain areas of his world. Her suspicions grew, leading her to discover a truth that shattered her trust: that Burt was already married. The revelation was devastating for Linda, as it would be for anyone that assumed their partner was just with them. And she immediately ended the relationship. She felt betrayed. She realized that Burt's promises of this future together, they were nothing but lies. But for Burt, okay, the breakup was not an end. His desire for Linda turned into that relentless obsession. He made repeated attempts to win her back, unable to accept that she had moved on, and unwilling to let her find happiness with someone else. Linda's rejection seemed to amplify his desire, morphing into a need to exert control over her life and her decisions. And this is a dark turn that would soon have dire consequences. Burt, he doesn't care about Linda's morals, the kind of life she wants to live. He wants the win, and he wants to go get it, and he doesn't want to hear no because he doesn't have those boundaries. And so, as Linda tried to move forward with her life, Bert's behavior grew increasingly erratic and very disturbing. He began following her, watching her every move, making attempts to contact her even when she was ignoring him. Linda's friends and family, they started to grow concerned for her safety as Bert's actions became more invasive. Despite her attempts to distance herself, Bert's obsession only intensified. His possessive attitude had reached a breaking point. Linda had to belong to him, or in his mind, she couldn't belong to anyone at all. And the breaking point came when Linda started dating someone new, a man she hoped would help her escape Bert's shadow. This relationship, however, set off an even darker side of Burt. The thought of Linda with another man drove him into a rage, and he made threats that, in hindsight, hinted at the violence he was capable of. Then, in a chilling turn, Burt acted on his threats in a way that would change Linda's life forever. Burt hired two men to carry out a violent plan he had orchestrated, paying them to confront Linda with an act that would ensure that no one else would ever want her. One day while Linda was at home, the men approached her and threw lye directly onto her face. The caustic substance left her with severe burns, permanent disfigurement, and the loss of sight in one eye. The brutality of the attack shocked the city, and the police quickly tied Burt to the crime, leading to his arrest. The public's reaction was one of outrage and disbelief. Burt, once seen as a respected attorney, was now the face of a crime so cruel that it left the community reeling. The court sentenced Burt to prison, and many assumed justice was served. The impact of his actions on Linda was something that no sentence could undo. For Linda, the attack was not just physical, it altered the entire course of her life, leaving her with both visible and invisible scars. Burt's incarceration brought a measure of relief for Linda, but the trauma of his attack left lasting scars that went far beyond the physical injuries. Her beauty, which had once been a source of confidence, was now a painful reminder of the horrific act Burt had orchestrated. Yet while Burt sat in prison, his obsession with Linda persisted. From his cell, he continued to write her, filling letters with apologies and declarations of love and promises that he had changed. And over the years, these letters became a constant presence in Linda's life, a haunting echo of the past she was desperately trying to move beyond. Linda's response to Burt's continued attention was complicated. Okay, on one hand, she wanted nothing more than to leave behind the trauma that he had inflicted. But on the other hand, she felt isolated. She was now a shadow of her former self, facing the world alone. The constant stream of letters wore down her defenses. He was always there. And as time passed, Linda started to reply. What started as brief, tentative responses gradually became a full correspondence between them. And for the public, this was an unbelievable twist. How could she even consider speaking to the man who had shattered her entire life? Years passed. Burt's sentence comes to an end. And once released, he seeks out Linda, of course, professing that he had changed and promising to make amends for the pain he caused. By this time, Linda's life was marked by solitude and the emotional scars of Burt's violent act. She was this. The unthinkable happened. After years of correspondence and Burt's persistent efforts to prove he was a changed man, Linda agreed to marry him. The decision shocked everyone around her and sparked public debate, dividing people into two camps: those who saw her as a tragic victim trapped in a cycle of trauma and manipulation, and those who believed she had made a strange, yet very conscious choice. Linda's marriage to Burt remains one of the most perplexing aspects of this case. Was she truly influenced by Burt, or did she see something in him that no one else could? Had Burt's letters from prison subtly reestablished his control over her? Or was Linda's decision rooted in her own complex personal motives? Even after the lie, had Burt really lost control? Linda's decision to marry Burt marked a shocking twist in an already disturbing story, and it threw public perception into complete chaos. Those who had initially sympathized with her as a victim of unimaginable cruelty, now they were struggling to understand her and her choices. Was this a case of Stockholm Syndrome, where the victim forms an attachment to their abuser? Or did the years of solitude and social isolation drive Linda to seek companionship, even if it meant returning to the man who had once sought to destroy her? Friends and acquaintances close to Linda believed that Burt had somehow retained a psychological hold over her, one that never left, exploiting the emotional scars he himself inflicted. And to them, her decision seemed like a desperate act, an outcome of years of emotional exhaustion, compounded by the alienation she faced from society. Despite the horror he had caused, Burt had been the one person who remained a constant in her life, albeit in a twisted, perverse way. The media was fascinated by this bizarre reunion. I mean, it's hard to talk about right now, right? And journalists, they chronicled every detail of their marriage. The couple gave interviews, posing as a reformed pair who had overcome their dark past, as if trying to rewrite their story in a way that felt, nice to the public. Burt, ever the showman, often spoke of his undying love for Linda. By contrast, Linda remained quieter, her expression often unreadable, and this left people to wonder if she even was really truly content in her new decision, or was she simply resigned to her choice? In the end, the facts tell a haunting story of love and cruelty intertwined. Burt's attack left Linda scarred for life. True. And yet she chose to share her life with him when he was released. To some, this is a testament to the complexity of human emotions and relationships, because they are difficult. And then to others, it's just a chilling reminder of the power an abuser can hold over a victim. Does a true victim even know exactly what their true emotions are at the end of the day? Do they need some kind of emotional cleansing? How can we know her thoughts are even her own? When does the power end and the individuality begin again? We don't know if that's happened here. The case of Linda and Burt, it remains one of the most bewildering stories in modern crime. It is an unsettling example of how the boundaries of influence, trauma, and forgiveness are not as clear cut as, we'd all want it to be. Okay, well, moving on, the trial for Burt, it was as much a media spectacle as it was a legal proceeding, captivating the public with its shocking details. Prosecutors framed Burt as a man driven by an uncontrollable need for dominance and revenge. To them, his wealth and influence had allowed him to live a life where he never faced real consequences. And Linda's rejection was the first time he'd been denied something he wanted, something he desired. And they argued that Burt's attack on Linda was the ultimate act of possession, a twisted attempt to ensure that if he couldn't have her, no one else would. His actions, they contended, demonstrated a clear pattern of manipulation and control that continued even after he was sent to prison. They presented him as a classic abuser, arguing that his letters from prison, filled with his remorseful promises and romantic declarations, were nothing more than manipulative tools, and that they were aimed at reeling Linda back into his web. They argued that he had a disturbing ability to distort reality, making his victims doubt their own feelings and choices. To them, Burt's post-prison relationship with Linda was a continuation of his original obsession, not a story of redemption and love. But then there's always that defense side, right? Burt's lawyers, they paint a drastically different picture and claim that Burt's actions, while undeniably violent, were the product of a broken man who had emotionally been devastated by Linda's rejection. And they argued that his attack on Linda, as horrific as it was, stemmed from intense feelings of love that had spiraled out of control, rather than from any sadistic desire to cause her pain. Burt, they claimed, had served his time. He had shown true remorse and had made every attempt to atone for his actions. His defense team argued that, if anything, his letters were proof of his genuine love and regret. And to them, Burt's reunion with Linda after prison was a testament to the power of forgiveness and redemption. They contended that Linda's decision to marry Burt was not a case of manipulation, but a conscious choice that she made out of her own free will. And to them, the fact that Linda agreed to marry him after all he had done, well, this was proof that he had changed. So the defense's portrayal of Burt as a reformed man, all right, well, it did little to sway the minds of many onlookers. Public reaction to the case was overwhelmingly skeptical of this whole idea that a person capable of such violence could truly change without any other motives in the way. To critics, Burt's actions before, during, and after his prison sentence demonstrated an alarming capacity for manipulation. They argued that the letters he sent from prison were not proof of love. They were proof of his ability to maintain control over Linda, ensuring she could never fully escape him. Psychologists following the case proposed that Burt's behavior fit the profile of an obsessive, controlling personality type, a person for whom love and control, they were inseparable. They suggested that Burt's letters were carefully crafted to wear down Linda's emotional resilience, a common tactic seen in an abusive relationship. His persistence in contacting her over the years was viewed as a form of psychological manipulation, aiming at exploiting her vulnerability and isolation. Yet the defense would always maintain that he had in fact transformed. He was haunted by his guilt, they said, driven by a desire to make this amends. But skeptics remained unconvinced. This complex web of arguments left people grappling with the profound questions about agency, forgiveness, and the capability for change. Do you guys out there, you believe in change? Change to this degree? Can't someone always change? It's a hard question. Could Burt truly have reformed? Or was he merely acting out another chapter in his ongoing obsession and manipulation plan? And was Linda's choice an act of autonomy or a tragic outcome of enduring emotional manipulation? As the news of Linda and Burt's marriage circulated, the public, they didn't just debate here. Okay, they reacted in ways that reflected broader societal shifts, I guess you'd say. The shocking turn of events here sparked conversations about domestic violence and trauma that had not been addressed so openly before. People were questioning whether Linda's decision to marry her attacker signaled deeper issues around manipulation and control. And it led to a surge in awareness about abusive relationships and the long term psychological effects they can leave behind. In an era where domestic abuse was often whispered about rather than confronted, okay? Mental issues, things, stuff like this, right? Just wasn't talked about like we do today. Today it's at the forefront. We're talking about it all the time. We're talking about it right now. Well, this case brought these issues into the public eye with an intensity that had rarely been seen before. So, part of our discussions today, you can thank this case. And this cultural impact, it didn't just only change conversations, it actually started some action. Advocacy groups began using this case to underscore the importance of mental health support for abuse survivors. They can't just get away from someone who hit them, for example, or said something mean to them. People argued that the legal system needed to address the psychological fallout of violent relationships, something it wasn't doing. Discussions about trauma bonding and cycles of abuse gained traction, leading some communities to offer support groups for those impacted by controlling or abusive relationships. In a sense, Linda and Burt's story became a catalyst for early awareness campaigns that sought to understand and support victims of abuse, aiming to prevent such tragic outcomes in the future. Furthermore, this case influenced public opinion on the concept of rehabilitation for violent offenders, with people questioning if someone like Burt could ever really truly change. For some, his release and reunion with Linda signaled the system's failure to protect victims from long term harm, sparking criticism about how the justice system approached domestic violence. The public outcry pushed some courts to look more closely at the psychological implications of violent acts on victims, a small but significant step toward addressing abuse as not merely physical, but deeply mental. And we know this today. They didn't know that then. And they know it today partly because this case brought it to the forefront. In essence, the case of Linda and Burt, it didn't just end with their marriage. This case resonated through society, raising awareness about the complex, often unseen consequences of abuse and leaving a lasting imprint on how the public and legal systems view cycles of violence and control. As we wrap up Linda and Burt's story, it's clear that this case is as unsettling as it is complex. What began as a love story quickly spiraled into a tragedy of obsession, violence, and deeply ingrained psychological scars. Question remains: was Linda a victim, unable to escape Bert's influence? Or did she consciously choose to forgive him, finding some semblance of redemption in the relationship? Consider Bert's actions. His initial obsession is what led him to destroy Linda's life, and it left her permanently scarred and traumatized. Yet despite this horror, his letters from prison kept Linda in his life, ultimately leading her right back to him and even to marry him. His capacity for control is undeniable. He maintained a hold on her even from behind bars. Now, was this an act of manipulation? Or was there perhaps a genuine remorse that Linda could see, even if no one else could? Now, on the other hand, think about Linda's choices. While her marriage to Burt may seem incomprehensible to many, it raises deeper questions about forgiveness and autonomy. Did Linda return to Burt out of a need for closure? Or was this a complicated form of love? Was her decision shaped by years of trauma that left her feeling she had no other options? Now, imagine yourself in Linda's position. You're scarred, both physically and emotionally. First thing you're thinking right now is, no way, I'd be all done, right? This woman faced a society that, it often stigmatizes victims. And society at that time, well, and every time, right, it places a heavy value on appearances. The isolation she experienced likely shaped her decisions and her interactions. It had to influence that, right? And with Burt being a constant, even though it was dark, he was a presence in her life. Can we truly understand the complex emotions that led her to marry him? Or is this one of those situations where only those involved can fully grasp the underlying reasons? And then there's the question of Burt's remorse. Was his pursuit of Linda after prison an attempt to really make amends here? Did he feel bad? He wanted to make it right. Or was this just another manifestation of his need for control? And if he was truly repentant, does that change how we view his actions? For some, the idea of forgiveness in this context is unfathomable, while for others, it might represent that rare example of grace and redemption, as it should be, even though it comes with a heavy cost. Ultimately, this story raises a challenging question about human relationships. How we judge decisions made under extreme circumstances, where the line between love and control, forgiveness and self-preservation. These questions are uncomfortable. Where is that line? What is okay? Okay to us? Okay to society? But these questions, they're at the heart of what makes this case unforgettable. And sometimes these questions are the questions that make us want to look away. Wow, that's too much. I've had enough of that. I don't know, right? We do that all the time. Linda couldn't do that. And so now it's over to you. Our jury in the court of public opinion. Was Linda's choice a testament to the complexity of forgiveness, or a heartbreaking example of how abuse can bind a person to their abuser? Do you believe Burt was genuinely reformed, or did he continue to manipulate Linda, even after prison? In a case like this, can there even truly be a right or wrong answer? As you consider these questions, remember that the court has made its decision, but the public was still divided and still is. The facts of this case may be clear, but the truth is anything but straightforward. Cases like Linda and Burt's remind us that life isn't always as black and white as we might hope. Love, trauma, forgiveness, and control are powerful forces that can lead to choices many of us will never fully understand. Thank you for joining me on this journey into one of the most unsettling cases of love and obsession. So now the question goes to you. Was justice truly served in this case? Or is there more to this story? Weigh the evidence, reflect on the complexities, and come to your own verdict. Stay safe out there, guys. Stay out of trouble. Stay aware. And until next time, this is Alexis Knight.